Hello. So we're going to continue on today with our, at this point, rather lengthy discussion, several videos of this idea of inner supply, bringing out the inner wealth within you. And as I've said throughout, this is not an easy subject. And there are certainly ways of doing this which are not as, you could say, deep or as, I guess, profound as what we've been exploring, especially with the stuff we've been quoting from Raymond Charles Barker and Joel Goldsmith. There are ways, to feel wealthier and bring out that wealth that are very basic, like the kind of stuff I talk about in 5-Minute Finances, some of the instructions that Murphy has given here. Murphy often gives really profound instructions in The Power of Your Subconscious Mind in this chapter about wealth, but he also gives some, rather simple affirmation instructions. And, giving money away, the happy money style. Again, I'll link above to that video I did talking a little bit about, basically doing the 5-Minute Finances thing and then just leaving money on the street, which is one of my favorite exercises to feel wealthy, and something that Lena Buenostar talks about in her book, Happy Money. Those are simple things to do, and they help. But the deeper conversation here about how supply is an inner quality is something that, most people don't really want to discuss, which is one reason we're discussing it here, is because I think it's really important if we're looking at these, manifesting law of assumption, law of attraction subjects, earnestly. This is certainly worth examining. And I think as you get more used to these ideas, a lot of this stuff becomes more relevant. Like for me, I mentioned in a podcast episode I did on Goldsmith, and I'm going to link to it above, and I'm going to quote from the same passage that I quoted, one of the passages I quoted from in that episode. I'm going to read it again now. When I found Joel Goldsmith, I think it was back in 2015, and it really wasn't until, and I read a lot of Goldsmith, but it was at that time, but it was very hard for me to digest a lot of it. And now, having been into these ideas for a lot longer, that was probably my first year or two of being into law of attraction ideas. It was hard for me to stomach a lot of the ideas that Goldsmith talked about. And I read Invisible Supply back then, but I've gotten much, much more out of it the last few months than I did back in 2015. And it's because I think I have a different relationship with these ideas and applying them in my life than I did back then. And I also think I understand the process of applying the absolute method or trustful passivity or the golden key or whatever you want to call it, when you be still and know that I am God, that idea, that concept, that approach. I think I appreciate that and understand that more in regards to my own practice. And this is just this is the important stuff if we want to talk about this idea of abundance being within, that again we don't really hear that much about. So I want to read this quote. I already read it, like I said, in a podcast episode, but I'm going to read it again from Invisible Supply because it's very good. It's very important, and it ties into what we were talking about yesterday about being envious of people, and also seeing a lot of people who have money, having, crappy morals and not being, good models for what real supply looks like. Because while they might have a lot of money, they aren't necessarily happy. We see that all of the time. But unfortunately, because of that, because that is so often the case, and just generally speaking, I would conjecture that the majority of people who are financially wealthy are not any happier than anybody else, quite frankly. And a lot of them have seen that their money has not provided them the solutions that they wanted. Because of that, though, often we do connotate, people who are wealthy, their behavior, if it's bad, with money itself. And it's got nothing to do with money. It has to do with their behavior. Money is neutral. It's a symbol of supply, and supply is loving. And supply is something within that really is part of the deepest part of what we are. So, Goldsmith wrote in An Invisible Supply, being grateful for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle on 1,000 hills, the trees that bloom, for all that we witness from waking until sleeping, for the fact that the principle of life is at work for us even while we are sleeping, is to me the highest form of gratitude, because there is nothing personal in it. It is a sense of gratitude that the infinity of God is omnipresent for all of us to share. The fact that so few receive from this infinite abundance has nothing at all to do with God. There is no favoritism on the part of God. God does not give more to one than to another. God has no favorite children, no favorite race, no favorite nation, nor does God reward the virtuous and punish the sinful. It is difficult to accept the doctrine of God's rewarding the virtuous and punishing the sinful when one sees so many sweet, virtuous people suffering disease or lack, while so many rascals abound in health and supply. Our supply is in direct proportion to our receptivity. That is, the degree of gratitude that we express, the degree of bread that we place upon the waters in the form of benevolence, forgiveness, praying for our enemies, and so forth, demonstrates our receptivity, because then we are expressing the spiritual principle of supply. That is an incredibly powerful passage, and hard to understand, one could say. Goldsmith says it's very difficult when you see a lot of sweet, virtuous people, loving people who don't have money and are suffering disease, and then you see all these people like we were talking about, people with a lot of wealth who have a bunch of wealth and are healthy, and they seem clearly to be immoral, one could say. But those people who have that wealth, that outer wealth, and have that outer health, and are living extravagantly but immorally, they do not have spiritual supply like what we're talking about here. They do not feel connected with God. Because as I said yesterday, if you feel connected with what's deep within you, we can call it God, we can call it the universe, we can call it the Tao, we can call it your Buddha nature, we can call it whatever you want. If you feel deeply connected with that, you're not going to be doing a bunch of immoral, crazy stuff. And you're not, in all likelihood, going to be hoarding money or doing anything of that nature. You're going to be using your money well. What Goldsmith is saying is we feel connected with that deep part within us, and recognize that deep part within us, not only is our morality and our goodness, but also is directly related in our supply in and of itself. It's not only something that generates supply, it is supply in and of itself. If we can touch that part deep within us, that godly part, that quality we have, which is impersonal, then we will express it outwardly as well. Goldsmith says, the principle of life is at work for us even while we are sleeping. And recognizing that, he said, is the highest form of gratitude, because there's nothing personal in it. This spiritual supply is not something personal between people. I give you money, you have some, I have some comes, you lose some, I gain some. It's not like that. It's impersonal. It's infinite. The infinity of God. Recognizing that. And Goldsmith says that our true supply, our spiritual supply, what we all want, everybody watching this video, what we all want, that supply, our supply, is in direct proportion to our receptivity of that. How receptive we are to that recognition, to that idea. Wealth is a subconscious conviction on the part of the individual. Do you have that subconscious conviction? Do you feel that wealth within you? It has nothing to do with your bank account or the people who have a lot of money or the people who don't have a lot of money. Our supply is in direct proportion to our receptivity. This is the deep stuff. This is what I'm working on in my own life. This is what I think a lot of people, when they get into these principles and really want to work with them and live them, get into, are ideas like this. Because obviously the supply is not just about money. It's about health. It's about your loving relationships. It's about helping other people. It's spiritual supply. And it's in direct proportion to our receptivity, according to Goldsmith. And it's, very, very powerful when we begin to recognize that that is true.